Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kayleigh Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies, and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur Podcast. And I'm joined today by the fabulous Zoe Thompson, who is a coach supporting those going from the public sector to self-employment. And we are going to be diving into exactly how to transition from the public sector into entrepreneurship. I am so excited to have you here on the podcast, Zoe. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
So this is something that Zoe and I connected about a little while ago, as both of us have gone from the public sector into being or becoming, should I say, an entrepreneur. So we are really excited to be bringing this podcast episode to our listeners. If you are in the public sector, I'm sure you'll be able to resonate with so many things. And if you're not, I'm sure there'll be so many things you can still resonate with and golden nuggets you can take away. But Zoe, before we dive into the whole topic of the transition, could you start by giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your own personal journey?
So I was 18 when I started working for the police. So I went in at an entry-level role with the idea of getting some life experience and work experience before putting an application in to be a police officer. I did apply, didn't get through, but actually the police force in general, so nationally, were going through what they call workforce modernisation at that time. So there were lots of roles that historically have been done by police officers that they were making into civilian roles. So that really is where my career took off. I saw lots of different roles, lots of different opportunities that were historically police officer roles, but were now being done by civilians. And so that's how I then spent my 20 years. 15 of those years were in leadership. So I went into leadership really early, really young. So I was 21 when I went into the first leadership role, and I was 30 when I went into a senior leadership role. And so loved my 20 years, had a secondary role as a self-development trainer, was also coaching and mentoring other people in the organisation, and was working in business change as well the last couple of years I was there. And it was that role that I was in that they then made redundant. So I actually came out of the police force through redundancy. I came to terms with that quite quickly, but actually the exit period I found really, really tough. Being in the organisation when the world is moving on without you, I found really challenging, because I'd always felt such an intrinsic part of it. I know that the roles that I did felt very significant. I felt that what I did was of value. Really hard to watch the world go on not being a part of that. However, I decided I was going to set up my own business. Didn't really know anything about setting up a business at that point, which I think was probably a benefit, because I just didn't know how much I didn't know, but made the decision that's what I was going to do. So that really gave me some focus in that redundancy period of, okay, what do I need to do? How do I set up a business? What do I need to do? What do I need to know? And then August the 1st was my actual redundancy date, but was also the date I launched the business. So that was just over 7 years ago, and I've had some amazing opportunities over the years. Love what I do, and now supporting other people that are on a similar pathway.
Amazing. What an incredible journey as well. And what would you say inspired you? I know personally kind of like your reasons for doing so, but what really inspired you to make the leap from public sector into entrepreneurship rather than going into another job, for example, in the public sector?
I think, if I'm being totally honest, I remember conversations that I was having around that time, the thought of going and working somewhere else was just as big and scary as setting up a business that I knew nothing about. So I think the overriding factor for me was I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I was good at. And so I wanted to make sure that I could do all of those things, and also just being able to do it on my own terms as well. And I think public sector is very restrictive. There's policies and processes and hierarchy and all of these things. And that had been my entire adult and working career, was being in this very tightly run ship and being told what to do or guided on what to do. And actually, maybe there was a little bit of rebellion in there as well, of like, actually, there's things that I really want to do, and I kind of want to do them my way too. So let me just venture out and do this on my own. Like I said, I think naivety played a big part in that, because I just didn't know. But I am somebody who jumps in with 2 feet and then think about it afterwards. It works well for me in lots of ways, and in other ways not quite so much. But I am somebody that kind of takes the step, takes action, and then thinks about it afterwards. And I think that definitely worked to my advantage for this.
But it's such a big step, such a big step. Like what you were saying there, there's so much of a difference from the public sector to being an entrepreneur and working on your own, or for those of our listeners that potentially might be in corporate and they're considering taking their business full time. There is such a big difference there, isn't there? Like you said, in terms of hierarchy, in terms of having a team, for example. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges then that you face in that transition? Because I feel like this is a really scary thing. Like a lot of people will struggle potentially with that fear of transitioning and leaving behind a very, what I would call, stable job normally, or a stable career in that sector. But what were some of the biggest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them?
I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of people, isn't it? It's that security blanket of being in that organization where actually job security, pretty much, I know we've been through this period of time with redundancies and lots of changes, but actually on the whole, it's a pretty secure industry to work in. And for a lot of people, it is a lifelong career. I know when I first started, I didn't ever plan on doing anything else. Like, police was my choice, and that was what I planned on doing. So I think for me, the biggest bit probably came about 6 months afterwards, I think, of that moment where I suddenly became very aware of how much I didn't know. And I think that was when I'd started to network a little bit more. I'd joined a community of other business owners. And I think there were a couple of things that happened at a very similar time. So firstly, I was a single parent, and I am a single parent. And so for me, it had to work. Like, this was not this is a nice thing to do, that this is, if I bring some money in, then that's great. I had to make it work. I had a teenager. I had to make this work. So there was lots of research, lots of like trying to find other people. And I found a business community, but a lot of it were people who had a partner that, so it took some of that, the pressure of having to earn an income off of the table a little bit for them. So for me, I found that the mindset that I needed was a different mindset. And I mean that very respectfully. The other people that were able to put family a higher priority, and the business supported that. But for me, it was almost the other way around. I knew the business had to come first, and I had to then find a way to fit my family priority in and around that. So I found the mindset shift was probably one of the biggest things for me, especially having coming out of the public sector as well. So I knew there was lots that I didn't know, but then trying to find that community of like-minded people that had a similar mindset, I found more of a challenge. I think it's a different space now. We're talking 7 years ago. So I think this is a challenge for women in business, because different people have different priorities, and there's no right or wrong hierarchy of how you do that. I think most of us, especially for those of us who are parents or who have caring responsibilities, because a lot of us now have parents to care for too, is balancing how are you driven and determined and successful as a business owner, and how are you also fulfilling your priorities and your responsibilities, and also being where you want to be and finding that balance. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me, was, okay, I have to make this work. I know there's a lot of things that I don't know, but where do I find the right people that are going to support me to get me to where I want to get to, not necessarily where they want to get to. And I think that was probably the biggest obstacle for me quite early on.
And I think there's so much uncertainty, isn't there, when you step into the world of entrepreneurship, and regardless of whether you're doing it now or whether you did it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, etc., it doesn't matter. I think everyone goes on their own journey, but there's that uncertainty. And sort of, as you were saying as well, we as parents, and I know especially if you're a single parent such as us, but it doesn't matter. You still have that responsibility to obviously bring in the income to support your families, etc. And so it's really interesting what you said there, and some of the challenges that you had was the fact that this has to work kind of concept and you know, and thoughts in your mind, you know, that mindset. And I was exactly the same. This has got to work. Like, I've got to at least match my salary from my previous role, and it has to work because I don't want to go back. You know, and I feel like that's like the biggest motivation, and you know, that's that determination within us that actually spurs us on even more in order to make it work, but actually in the empowering way. And I think that's an interesting one as well with the whole mindset piece. Is I think when you know it has to work, but you want it to work, and you want it to work out of that empowerment, out of that belief that you can impact positively people's lives, you can change people's lives, you can support them and help them, then I think that is the, you know, the real secret there to success. It's always going to be a part of the mindset shifts and the mindset work that we do. So I think one of the questions that would be really, really good to dive into is, you know, I'm sure there are many listeners to this podcast that are currently in the public sector or the private sector, doesn't matter, but they're looking to take their business full time. If they're feeling potentially hesitant or unsure, what advice would you give them on this front?
I think this is the tough one, I think, and it's also probably the most common question when I first connect with people. That's quite often the first question people will ask, and it's like, how will I know when I'm ready to go? You know, how will I know that the business is viable, that it's got a future in it, that it is going to bring in consistent income? And I think that's you know, that is the big challenge. But I think for me, it's really important that you have enough information to be able to horizon scan and see what your business is likely to bring in over the next 12 months and longer, that you've got some flexibility and contingency within your plan to be able to bring new things in, that you've got capacity within your own time and energy, because, you know, even when you come out of working your 9 to 5 or your shift work, you might still have other responsibilities that might mean you don't have, you know, you will have a certain amount of time each week to work in your business and on your business. So how much time do you have to work with, but also how much time do you want to work within your business? Because, you know, just because you're coming out doesn't mean that you need to work full time. For some people, you want to work a little bit less, but also being really clear on your numbers. You know, how much do you need to earn to be able to make that change? Like, realistically, what's your minimum number? But also, what changes can you make that will help you to flex that number? You know, are there certain things that you can go without if that's the case? And how much savings have you got? You know, how much have you got in the bank that buys you that little bit of time if things do slow down? Because I think for a lot of us, public sector and private sector, when you're used to a regular income, you live to that income, don't you? That number that lands in your bank account on the 28th of every month or whatever date it is, you learn to live with that. And with self-employment, you don't have that regular number hit your bank account on a certain day. So you have to be able to know that you've got that contingency pot in there as well. So I think the more information, the better, but knowing where you are now, where do you need it to get to, then helps you to identify those steps for that journey, so that you then know, okay, well, I need to do these things. The business needs to be in this particular place for me to know that I'm ready to make that next step. But a lot of it is also in the mindset and the confidence, because that taking that step is a big step to take. Do you ever feel ready? Probably not. Do you have that courage to step into that, knowing that the confidence and that reassurance will come? Do you have that community around you to be able to give you the support and the guidance? I think is also really important. So for me, you know, creating that community of people that you can check in with, that you can reach out to, because otherwise it's a very lonely place. And I did that the harder way, which is probably why I've set certain things up now, because I came out and worked in isolation. And so that for me, coming out of a place of, like you said, having all of these people around you who are all incredibly supportive, to being on your own is a huge change. So for me, it's making sure that while you're in this place where you're building your business, that you're also building a community of people around you that are going to give you that support. So when you do step out of the public sector, you're stepping into this new world of supportive people. I think that's also really important.
I completely agree. I think having your circle, as I would say, your circle of people, your support network, people that you can message and just chat to or reflect or bounce ideas off is just so empowering and so important, I think, because it is a lonely journey. It's something that I think a lot of people do struggle, especially if you're so used to being surrounded by people every single day, being in a busy
Yeah.
office, for example, or in my case, it was in a school with thousands of students coming up to you every day going, miss. You don't get that. And all of a sudden it's so different and it's so quiet. And you're like, wow, this is interesting. So
I
yes, I
think,
definitely agree.
and also people who you can be honest with, that you also
Yes.
know are honest with you, because like, let's be honest, like social media and how people present their business is not always the reality. And I had probably been out for about 6 months going to networking before somebody whispered in my ear, because I'd made a comment around, oh, everybody's so successful and everybody's doing this. And somebody kind of whispered in my ear and said, you do realize that most people sitting around this table have more than one income stream, and actually what they're talking about in terms of their business is not what's paying the bills. Because in the public sector, everybody's so honest, and like that integrity is so crucial when you're in the public sector, because you've got scrutiny not just from your colleagues and your bosses, but from the public as well. So stepping into the business world and realizing that not everybody is completely honest with the truth, or perhaps they hold things back to create a different picture, that for me was, wow, okay, like you, and people are okay with this. So that was a real eye opener for me. But I think having a group of people where you can be really honest and say, actually, this week is a struggle, or I've tried to launch this and it's just not landing, and can you help me, give me some ideas? I think it's really important just have that safe space to be able to share what your challenges are and get the support with that.
Absolutely. Completely agree. When you, if we go back to sort of the beginning of your journey as an entrepreneur, were there any surprising lessons or any unexpected realities that you encountered that you hadn't anticipated, for example?
I think that would have just mentioned, the it's not dishonest, but it's a very much the picture that people paint, and how things are suggested that may not necessarily be strictly true. I think that really threw me of how common that is, and also how accepted that is. Like, it's okay for you to put certain things on your website that might suggest you've done certain things and you've done something similar, but you haven't actually done that because it creates a good impression. I think that kind of threw me a little bit, because you just assume that people in business are, it is what it is, but actually it isn't always what it appears to
Yeah.
be. I think the audience build and the sales and the marketing was a real challenge for me, because we don't have that in the public sector. And this is
No.
something I talk about with my audiences, my community, a lot, because I say to people, you cannot start early enough in trying to build that audience, because in the public sector, people come to you because they have to come to you. They don't have a choice of, well, there's 10 different coaches I can choose from, or I can go and see this person, or I actually like this person. They have you, and they have only you. And sometimes they don't even have the choice. They have to come to you because legally they have to come to you. Certainly in the police world and in school, we have to go to school. So I think knowing that people have that choice, and knowing how long it takes to build the like, the know, and the trust, it is very different. So in the police, there's an expectation that you can be trusted, and actually likability doesn't come into it. You're there to provide a service regardless. So I think for me, like the first time I launched something, it was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, people would be falling over themselves to to do this. And then you hear about conversion rates, and then you hear about algorithms, and only 1% of your audience actually see what it is that you're selling. So I think all of that, the sales, the marketing, the audience building, was probably the thing that made me realize that actually I need to learn this, I need to understand this and continue to keep learning it because it's continuously changing, to be able to run a viable and successful business. So I think that was probably the biggest turning point, because, you know, for years it was all about reducing demand, you know, it wasn't about increasing it. So
yeah. And were there any particular strategies that helped you manage the transition, whether it's financial, emotional, practical, to really support you with that transition?
I think consistency is probably, you know, creating the plan and then being consistent with the plan, I think is probably the one thing that has served me really well over the years. And I think I'm a creature of habit anyway, which works really well. But I think there's lots of things we learn in the public sector that are great transferable skills. You know, doing what you said you were going to do, that is not always commonplace in business. You know, if you've said you're going to do something, you do it. If you over deliver, under promise, over deliver, but you're also consistent and reliable. And I think that is really important. Like, it's all very well creating a plan, but then you have to show up and deliver that plan. You have to be consistent, you have to be visible, you have to be reliable. So I think a lot of the behaviors were probably the thing, if that makes sense. I don't know that the strategies as such really came into place, and I think strategies change a lot. You know, buying behaviors change, or your services or your products change, then quite often that strategy that supports that changes with it. But I think the behaviors are really important, and I think in public sector we have this incredible toolbox of behaviors that serve us really well as business owners. We have to utilize them, you know. And I think not shifting into, oh well, I can do this whenever I want. It's like, no, you sit down at the desk, you do what you said you were going to do, and you're consistent and reliable and deliver for the people that are investing in you. I think that's really important.
And I think going back to what you just mentioned there in terms of sort of having a plan as well, really interestingly, you know, I think again with that transition, even things such as having a daily plan, having a weekly plan, having a plan to stick by. I think again in the public sector, I know it kind of does depend which aspect of the public sector you work in, but I definitely know for me, I knew exactly what meetings, what lessons I was delivering every single day, literally from 7 o'clock in the morning when I arrived at school till about 5 when I left. And I found that transition myself personally so different, because I had to create my own plan and create my own coaching days, create my own admin list and all of these things, especially at the beginning where I didn't have any team at all. It was purely just me. So is there any advice that you would give people like creating a plan, but managing your time? Because I feel like that's something that, again, is a bit of a struggle at the beginning stages after that transition.
So time management, and then also prioritization. I think you need to be able to prioritize to be able to manage your time. And I think that's one thing that I help a lot of people with, is understanding what to prioritize, especially for those people that are still working. So still have the 9 to 5, or still having, you know, still working shifts, that actually, if you've only got an hour each day to work on your business, what do you need to prioritize? What's going to help you to move the needle of your business forward and keep that momentum going? But I think the planning is really important. Interestingly, like in the police, my world was slightly different to yours in that you didn't know what was coming in. However, you did have certain things that you did know. So you knew that certain things were going to happen. You didn't know what those things would be, but you knew that what you could expect. And managing then the unexpected and having that contingency plan around that is really important. So a lot of what I do with the clients now is helping them to work out, okay, if you've got 1 hour a day, what do you do that helps you to be consistent, that helps you to keep that momentum going? But also, I think it's really important to look at what you do know, and then look at what it is that you want to be able to do each week, and work out what your priorities are. So I talk to my clients about a bronze, silver, and gold levels. So your your silver is kind of your average day. So on an average day, these are the things that I want to get done. But on a bronze day, this is the absolute bare minimum that I need to do to work on my business. So when you have those days where it is extremely, you get home from a very busy shift and you don't have a huge amount of energy, and you've got children to take care of or other caring responsibilities, other priorities, what's the one thing that you can do that's still going to mean that you've shown up for your business today and you've still been consistent? And if you can do a little bit more, then you hit silver. And on the days where you're not working, or on the days where you're taking time out and you want to invest more time and energy, then you're now hitting the gold standard. But being able to hit a bronze every day and knowing that you're showing up for your business, knowing that you're taking that little pocket of time to work on the priorities, can make such a big difference. And I see the real shift in people when they go from that very sporadic, oh, I've done something on a Monday and then something on a Thursday, and on Sunday I'm wondering what else I can do, to actually, I've got a plan for the week. This is the one thing I'm going to get done every day. And if I've got time, then I'll do this. And if I've got more time, then I'll add this to it as well. And just that consistency and the momentum that builds helps to shift the mindset. And also, I think you can really see a difference in confidence as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And do you find as well, I was having a conversation with some of my clients in one of my programs last night about celebrating and actually celebrating your success. Because again, I think whether you're in the public sector, the private sector, corporate, it doesn't matter. You normally always have someone above you who will say, well done, who will give you a pat on the back, who'll be like, you've done a good job today, Kayleigh or Zoe. And that you got that recognition. And I think when you work for yourself, you don't really get that. You have to provide it for yourself. And something that we were talking about yesterday was the fact that how often do you celebrate your own successes? And I'm not even talking monetary success to an extent. I'm talking how often do you celebrate the daily things that you achieve? Sometimes I think we need that boost, that momentum. We need that recognition. But if we're not getting it from someone else, and for example, you probably get it from your own coach if you have a coach. I'm sure most people do, but even in your business, you need that kind of recognition, don't you? And that kind of, oh, okay, I'm doing a good job. So any advice around that in regards to celebrating your own success?
And I like to sit and reflect on the week at the end of the week. I think it's really important. And I think it's important for you to celebrate those wins as much as it is to look at, okay, what didn't work so well this week? And what did I learn from that? And how can I change some things around ready for next week? We know we've got a negative bias. We're going to go to all of the things that didn't work well. We're going to go to all of the crappy stuff first. We know that. So we have to train ourselves to look for the small wins. And I always say to the people that I work with, if you've had a tough week, this is the most important time to pull out the wins and the successes from the week, because you need to help yourself to mentally balance that out, because there will be wins in there. There will be successes in there, even if the success and the win is the fact that you are here checking in and you've survived the week, you've got through the week and you're in one piece. So I think it is really important. But I think this is where communities and memberships work really well, because you do then have that circle of people around you that give you that encouragement when you're having a bit of a wobble, or they say, oh, me too, when you tell them that something is a challenge. And I think sometimes knowing that other people are experiencing the same and it's not just you makes a real difference. But having other people to celebrate the wins with, I think is a really nice thing to have. So if you're not in a membership or a community, or you don't have a coach to check in with, find a friend that you can message at the end of the week and say that this has gone really well, or I'm really proud that I made this happen, because I think it is really, really important.
And looking back at your own journey, is there anything that you would have done differently during your transition, or what would you say is the most rewarding part of your journey so far?
Oh, there's so much. And so the podcast that I have, where I interview people that have come out of the public sector to run their own business, is called If I Knew Then. And the last question I always ask them is, okay, if you knew back then what you know now, what would you do differently? And interestingly, most guests are saying that actually they wouldn't change anything, because that's all it's got them to where they've got to. The lessons they've learned along the way have helped them to put them on a different path, or make different decisions. And I think I probably would agree with that. Now, I think there's lots of things that I think that, again, this comes down to the trust, that beginning bit. Now, I did some work for a charity at the beginning, who I was just, it was a great job. I loved doing it, but when it came to pay and invoicing, they tried to diddle me out of what we'd agreed at the beginning. And then I just found that actually that awareness in business coming out of the police, I think you're aware that you're a little bit cynical, and perhaps like you look at people with suspicion. And I think that naivety of in business, it would be different. I had a wake up call quite quickly, and I was like, okay, you need to get those terms and conditions and contracts in up front. You need to make sure for you with your clients, but also for the work that you do as well. That's all really important. But, there's not been anything that I would say has completely knocked the wind out of my sails. I think there's been little bumps in the road, but probably not anything that you wouldn't get in a normal career, if that makes sense. I think having good people around you to help you work it out when it does happen is really important. And I think I've needed different people with me at different times. Now, I think you need to move in a circle that is almost that little bit ahead of where you're trying to get to, that inspire you and help you to see what is possible and help to push you to your potential. Because I think where we think our potential is to where it actually is, two different things. I think we need to be the little fish in the big pond, probably more than we're comfortable with. And that's probably not something I've done up until like the last couple of years. But the difference for me, once I started doing that, was huge for me personally and professionally.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for sharing your insights in terms of your own experience and your transition, as well as some advice. So what would be the final piece of advice to our listeners, for those, especially for those who are considering transitioning from the public sector or the private sector into entrepreneurship?
Excuse me. I think it does very much depend on the reasons why you want to leave. So I think there's a big exodus from the public sector right now because it's a difficult place to work in. I think be really clear on why you want to leave, regardless of whether you're going into a different job role or you're looking to start up your business. Be really clear on what it is about being in the public sector that is no longer making you happy. Because the clearer you are on that, the more you are going to put that into designing a business model that's going to work for you and is going to be sustainable long term. So what I'm seeing sometimes is that in that rush to get out, people are jumping on a passion project, or they're jumping on something that they can see would bring in an income, and they're not taking the time to work out, okay, what is it I need from the business other than finances? What else do I need? What do I need in terms of my purpose, my values, my needs? I think that's all really, really important. So if you're looking to leave the public sector, know why it's no longer serving you. Understand why it's frustrating. Understand why it's a pain point now, rather than this passion and purpose that you probably signed up to do. The more you're clear on that, the more you'll be able to take that into consideration when you're designing your business. And I think that would probably be, if I had to pick one thing, it would be that. Don't rush it. Don't, understand where you are now, because that will help you to create the future that is really going to serve you and give you that fulfillment.
Amazing. Great advice. And for everyone that's listening, please do go and connect with Zoe. Zoe, where can everyone find you and connect with you?
So I am where you would expect me to be in terms of socials. If you put my name in, zoethompson.uk, that should bring me up. But if not, it's all linked in from the website, which is also zoethompson.uk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And final question before we leave, before we wrap up this episode. This is a question that I ask every single guest on the podcast. What is your one word of the year and why?
My word for this year, going into the beginning of this year, was elevate. I felt personally and professionally I was ready to step up a gear. So far, so good. And it's only October.
We've had so many incredible words come on on the podcast and people. So I love this. Thank you so much for sharing. So to all of our listeners, go and give Zoe a follow, go and connect with her, say hello. She's incredible at what she does. And if you are considering leaving the public sector, she is your go-to person. Absolutely. Zoe, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, my lovely. And thank you to everyone that has joined us for today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And I will see you all again next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast with me, your host, Kayleigh Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow, and scale your dream six-figure or multi-six-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.